They vanished just hours after their wedding, after stopping for a quiet picnic. For 13 years, their families searched with no answers, until skeletal remains and a torn wedding dress were found deep inside a cave. No suspects, no witnesses. But the person who finally led police to that cave wasn't a stranger. Before we begin, take a second to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications, because stories like this deserve to be remembered, and the victims deserve their voices heard. In the summer of 2011, newlyweds Caleb Mercer and Lena Whitford were supposed to be at the happiest point of their lives. Their wedding had ended only hours earlier. Friends were still posting photos. Family members were still replaying toasts. Instead of heading straight to their hotel, the couple made one quiet decision: a short picnic stop in the hills outside Silver Ridge, Colorado. They never came back. For 13 years, their disappearance remained one of the most painful and baffling missing persons cases in the state. No ransom demand. No credit card activity. No witnesses. No crime scene. Just two people erased from their own future. Until a cave. Hidden beneath layers of rock and silence, investigators would eventually uncover skeletal remains, and a wedding dress still tangled around bone. But the most disturbing discovery wasn't what was found underground. It was who brought police there. And by the end of this story, you may question how closely you really know the people standing beside you on your happiest day. Caleb Mercer and Lena Whitford married on June 18, 2011, in a small vineyard outside Silver Ridge, Colorado. The ceremony was intimate, emotional, and meticulously planned. Lena's friends described her as nervous but glowing. Caleb, a mechanical engineering graduate student, couldn't stop smiling through the entire reception. Their best man, Dylan Rowe, had known Caleb since middle school. He gave a heartfelt speech about loyalty, brotherhood, and standing by someone for life. No one noticed anything unusual in his voice. By 9:40 p.m., the reception wound down. Guests assumed the newlyweds were heading straight to their hotel in Denver for their honeymoon send-off the next morning. But Caleb sent one last text to his sister. "We're stopping for a quick picnic. Just us. Be back later." It was a strange choice for newlyweds in wedding clothes, but it fit their personalities. They loved quiet moments away from crowds, especially in the foothills near Red Hollow Park. At 11:52 p.m., Lena posted a blurry photo of their picnic blanket near the tree line. That photo would become the last confirmed trace of them alive. By morning, their hotel room remained untouched, and Caleb Mercer and Lena Whitford had vanished. By noon the next day, panic had replaced celebration. Lena's parents drove to the Denver hotel themselves after repeated calls went straight to voicemail. The front desk confirmed the couple had checked in online, but had never arrived in person. Their car, a silver Subaru Outback, was still missing. Within hours, the Silver Ridge Police Department opened a missing persons case. Search teams were sent to Red Hollow Park, focusing on the wooded overlook where Lena's final photo appeared to be taken. Volunteers walked the trails in tight lines. K-9 units followed scent traces that ended abruptly near a narrow gravel pull-off. There were no signs of a struggle. No blood. No damaged vegetation. Just tire marks, too faint to identify, and a crushed paper napkin near the tree line. Investigators initially treated the case as a possible accident. The surrounding terrain dropped into steep ravines, and flash storms were common in early summer. But helicopters found no wreckage, no fallen hikers, and no trace of the newlyweds' vehicle. When Caleb's bank account showed no activity after the wedding night, detectives quietly shifted their tone. This was no longer a lost couple scenario. It was a disappearance. And while the families pleaded publicly for information, one person stayed strangely distant from the search. Their best man. Dylan Rowe never once joined the volunteer teams. In the first week after the disappearance, detectives interviewed everyone who had attended the wedding. When they reached Dylan Rowe, The answers came easily. He said he left the reception at 9:15 p.m., earlier than most guests. He claimed he had a long drive back to Fort Collins and an early shift the next morning at a commercial electrical company. His phone records supported part of his story: calls and texts from the highway, short data pings moving north. On paper, Dylan looked clear. In person, something felt wrong. Detective Marissa Grant later wrote in her report that Dylan never once asked what investigators believed had happened to Caleb and Lena. He never asked where the search teams were focusing. He didn't ask if the photo Lena posted had revealed anything useful. Instead, he kept repeating one sentence: "They probably just needed space." Friends noticed it too. While the families organized candlelight vigils and fundraisers, Dylan stopped responding to group messages. He avoided the couple's social circle. When Caleb's sister approached him at one memorial walk and asked if he would speak, he quietly shook his head and walked away. It wasn't grief. It was distance. Still, without evidence, police had no legal reason to push harder. For nearly a decade, Dylan Rowe remained exactly what everyone needed him to be: just a friend who drifted away. By the second year, the search for Caleb Mercer and Lena Whitford had slowed to a whisper. Posters faded from grocery store windows. The dedicated tip line rang less and less. Silver Ridge detectives quietly reassigned the case to cold file status, reopening it only when occasional tips came in, usually from psychics, internet sleuths, or people who claimed they had seen a couple who looked similar in another state. None of it led anywhere. Caleb's mother kept his phone active for 5 years, hoping one day it would light up with a missed call or a location ping. Lena's father returned to Red Hollow Park every anniversary of their disappearance, walking the same narrow trail near the overlook where the last photograph had been taken. Nothing changed. Except Dylan Rowe. In 2016, he moved out of Colorado entirely, settling in rural eastern Kentucky. He married. He started a small construction business. His name vanished from local social media circles. To most people, Dylan's departure meant nothing. But to investigators, it quietly removed the only person from the wedding party who had never fully accounted for his movements that night. When Silver Ridge detectives attempted a follow-up interview in 2018, Dylan declined through a lawyer. It was legal. It was smart. And it was exactly what a man with nothing to hide would do. At least, that's what everyone assumed. The call came in on February 3, 2024. It wasn't anonymous. It was precise. The man on the line identified himself as a local cave guide in Carter County, Kentucky. He said a hiker had reported seeing what looked like fabric tangled in rocks inside a shallow, unmapped cave off a restricted trail near Pine Ash Ridge. At first, authorities suspected illegal dumping. But when deputies followed the narrow opening into the limestone shelf, their flashlights reflected off something pale and unmistakably human. A partial skull, fragments of rib, a collapsed spine, and wedged between broken stone and dirt, still faintly white beneath 13 years of decay, were layers of lace. A wedding dress. The cave wasn't deep. It wasn't hidden behind a maze of tunnels. It was simply out of sight. Forensic teams worked through the night, carefully removing every fragment. Soil samples were collected. Buttons and fabric were sealed in evidence bags. One small gold cufflink, engraved with the letter C, was recovered near the edge of the remains. Within 48 hours, dental records confirmed what families had feared for more than a decade. The remains belonged to Caleb Mercer and Lena Whitford. But the question that shattered investigators wasn't how they died. It was how two people who vanished in Colorado had ended up beneath a cave in Kentucky. Transportation records became the first puzzle. There were no flight records for Caleb or Lena after their wedding night. No toll camera hits connected to their missing Subaru. No border crossings. Nothing that explained a cross-country move to Kentucky. So investigators looked at people who could move freely. People with vehicles. people who already had a reason to leave town. When Kentucky State Police shared the cave location with Silver Ridge detectives, one name appeared quietly, but immediately, on both departments' internal lists. Dylan Rowe. His construction business operated less than 15 miles from Pine Ash Ridge. More importantly, his personal phone records placed him near the cave area several times in the years following his move. That alone meant nothing, until a deeper digital review revealed something far more unsettling. In 2013, 2 years after the disappearance, Dylan's phone searched for one phrase repeatedly. How long before human remains are unidentifiable? Not once, not casually, but over multiple days. When investigators re-interviewed Dylan's former co-workers, one remembered a strange offhand comment. Dylan had once joked that caves were nature's perfect hiding place. It still wasn't enough for an arrest, but it was enough for a warrant. And for the first time in 13 years, detectives finally had a reason to knock on the door of the man who stood beside the couple on their wedding day. On a chilly morning in March 2024, Silver Ridge detectives, joined by Kentucky State Police, arrived at Dylan Rowe's home. He answered the door calmly, a coffee mug in hand, as if expecting old friends for a casual visit. The calm didn't last. Detectives explained why they were there, why his movements and online searches had drawn their attention, why 13 years of silence had ended with the discovery of the remains under Pine Ash Ridge. Dylan's face remained unreadable. He nodded once, almost politely. "Can we talk inside?" one officer asked. Inside, investigators noticed small remnants of cave maps pinned on a corkboard. Stray rope, carabiners, and hiking boots littered the floor. Nothing overtly incriminating, but a pattern was emerging. Over 3 hours, Dylan offered a story, carefully constructed. He claimed he had visited the area as a guide for friends, or to explore during his free time. He denied any involvement in the couple's disappearance. He suggested the cave's discovery was a tragic coincidence. Then detectives asked about the Subaru, the cufflink, the wedding dress. His calm demeanor cracked. Not entirely, but enough to see a shadow of fear. That was the first real reaction any officer had witnessed from Dylan Rowe in 13 years. And detectives knew one thing for certain: this man was hiding something. The search warrant covered Dylan Rowe's truck, workshop, and a small storage unit he rented outside town. At first, the unit seemed empty, just scrap wood, broken ladders, and old construction tools. But hidden beneath a false plywood panel at the back wall, investigators found a sealed plastic container. Inside were 3 items: a cracked smartphone, a folded picnic blanket, and a small leather pouch containing 2 gold wedding rings. Engraved inside were the names, Caleb and Lena. Forensic analysis showed the blanket fibers matched the fabric seen in Lena's final photograph. Dirt trapped in the stitching was consistent with soil from Red Hollow Park in Colorado. The phone powered on. It belonged to Caleb. It had been wiped, almost completely. Almost. One corrupted video file remained, less than 12 seconds long. The footage was dark and violently shaky. A flashlight beam cut across rock walls. A woman's voice cried out once, sharp and panicked. Then the camera dropped. Audio continued. And in the background, unmistakably close, a man's voice whispered, "Just stay quiet. I'm trying to help you." Investigators froze the frame on the final visible image. A familiar face filled the corner of the screen. It was Dylan Rowe. Confronted with the recovered evidence, Dylan Rowe finally stopped pretending. During a second interrogation, he asked for a lawyer. Then, after a brief private consultation, he agreed to speak. Not to confess, but to explain. According to Dylan, he had followed Caleb and Lena after the reception. He claimed he was worried about Caleb's emotional state after a private argument earlier that evening. He insisted he only meant to check on them when he saw their car turn toward Red Hollow Park. He said the picnic turned into a confrontation. Old resentment surfaced. Years of quiet jealousy poured out. Caleb had gotten the life Dylan believed should have been his. The conversation escalated. And somewhere near the edge of the overlook, Dylan admitted he shoved Caleb. Caleb fell. Lena screamed. Panic took over. Dylan claimed Lena slipped while trying to reach her husband, striking her head against the rocks. But investigators believed something far darker happened next. Dylan didn't call for help. He didn't run. He loaded their bodies into his truck, drove through the night, and began the long, deliberate journey across state lines. Not to escape, but to hide them forever. Under a cave he already knew well. Dylan Rowe was formally charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder, abuse of a corpse, and interstate transportation of human remains. The trial began in federal court in late 2025, drawing national attention. Prosecutors dismantled Dylan's carefully rehearsed version of events piece by piece. Medical experts testified that Lena Whitford's skull fracture was inconsistent with an accidental fall. Defensive wounds were found on fragments of her forearms. Caleb Mercer's injuries suggested repeated blunt force trauma, far more than a single shove. Digital analysts reconstructed portions of the damaged phone footage, enhancing the audio. In the background of Lena's cry, a second phrase could be heard. "Don't make this harder," spoken by the same voice. Dylan's. The jury saw the recovered wedding rings, the picnic blanket, the corrupted video file, the search history, the repeated trips to Pine Ash Ridge. But the most devastating moment came when Caleb's sister took the stand. She described trusting Dylan with every private detail of their lives, because he was family. After just 6 hours of deliberation, the jury returned unanimous guilty verdicts on all major charges. Dylan Rowe showed no visible emotion as the judge sentenced him to life in federal prison without the possibility of parole. For the families, justice had finally arrived. But it arrived 13 years too late. If you've stayed with this story until the end, take a moment to remember Caleb Mercer and Lena Whitford, not for the way their lives ended, but for the future that was stolen from them before it ever had the chance to begin. They were newly married. They were hopeful. They trusted the people around them. And they believed the worst moments of their lives were behind them, not waiting quietly in the shadows. This case is a haunting reminder that danger doesn't always come from strangers. Sometimes it stands beside you in family photos. Sometimes it gives a speech at your wedding. Sometimes it promises loyalty, while hiding resentment that grows for years in silence. If stories like this matter to you, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share this story so their names continue to be spoken. Your support helps bring attention to cases that were ignored, forgotten, or buried, literally and figuratively, by time. And if there's one thing to take away from this case, let it be this. Listen to your instincts. Protect your peace. And never assume that familiarity is the same thing as safety. Thank you for watching.